Greetings, fellow thinkers and drinkers, and welcome to another Deep Purple themed video. Having dispensed summarily, some may say, with Marks 1, 3, 4, and 5, I'm now going to attempt to explain why I hold Mark 2 as being vastly superior to any and all of the above mentioned. Ian Gillan and Roger Glover joined July 1969. Their first studio album together, Fireball, did not emerge until June of next year. In between times, they gigged a hell of a lot. Including, not forgetting, the orchestra in September of 69, John Law's little pet project, shall we say, which gained them considerable publicity, but somewhat got up the nose of Mr. Blackmore. And perhaps fortuitously, in hindsight, for the confusion that Blackmore thought that this brought to the band, directly, I think, inspired him to set down the work ethic for the new record. And I think, if I'm quoting correctly, he said, if it's not exciting or dramatic, it does not belong on this album. Well, I suppose all we can say is mission accomplished. Deep Purple in rock is a cornerstone of what we call as hard rock, heavy metal music. From the iconic Mount Rushmore inspired cover to the very last notes of Hard Loving Man, this is a monumental piece of work. Obviously, one cannot go back in time and cannot really imagine what it would have been like, but one tries nevertheless. Take yourself back to your formative years when your musical tastes were developing. Was there anything around in 1970 that would have prepared you for a Black Sabbath debut or Deep Purple in rock? Maybe there was, I don't know. I can't think of anything. Yes, Zeppelin had hinted at aspects of this, but ultimately their journey lay down a different path. This, especially now Deep Purple in rock, is as heavy as the band probably ever got, as close as they ever became to what would go on to become heavy metal. Well, can I say, it's a fantastic record. It's an artistic triumph. Even from the production point of view, listening to it today, it does sound a little dated. Well, it comes from 1970, I suppose that's fair. But there is a difference between the sound of this record and the sound of the three Mark I records, which automatically updates it. And I think at the time would have sounded very modern, very of its time, whereas, as I've said in the previous video, those Mark I albums still had that hangover of that 60s sound. 7 tracks. Not a wasted second. This is unbelievable. This is a real assault on the senses. This is not a record asking timidly to be heard. This is demanding your attention. Again, I wasn't around in 1970, but this, upon hearing this for the first time, this must have really, this was a conversation stopper. It had to have been. I can't think of anything that was really comparable at that time. I'm not here to review the records. We all know and love them. That's not the purpose of this. What I'm saying is that these are 7 incredibly good songs, very well composed. Just because it is such a brutal assault does not mean this is just blood and thunder. It isn't. We know who's playing on this. These are very well composed, very well arranged, and extremely well executed songs. Blackmore's solo on Child in Time, as well as Lord's solo on Hard Loving Man, are as thrilling today as they must have been when they were first heard in 1970. Not a weak moment here. Everybody on top form. But I have to say, again, trying to imagine a comparison to what was going on at the time, was there anybody quite like Ian Gillan? I don't just mean his ability to scream. We know that. But his phrasing, his diction. Even when he's screaming, you can just about decipher, understand every word he's saying. He was singing with such clarity that the more blues-based singers, they used to mumble their words. Slide of, I don't know, conveying emotion, who knows? But if I can give an acting example, Gillan singing here is John Gielgud. This is perfect diction. Whereas some of the more blues-based singers, maybe even including Coverdale, was more Marlon Brando. Those old enough will I'm surely get what I'm talking about. For anybody not old enough, I apologize. Do some research. Not only his lyrics, which are going to be unique, shall we say, but his ideas of vocal melodies are not traditional. This would develop further in the future. But the change in attitude, the addition of Gillan and Glover as a songwriting team, shall we say, into what was already there, plus the impetus that we all freely admit came from Blackmore. He effectively said, enough of playing with these fucking orchestras. We're going to try this my way, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back to playing with orchestras. As we now know, it worked. This is just, it's an amazing statement. A statement of intent. Has it been bettered? I don't know. And you can't say it's their debut, for the simple fact it isn't. But, wow. Again, it's up there with the first Black Sabbath album, that for what we would go on to know as heavy metal. It has to have started with these two records. Purple would take a different path to Sabbath, but again, that's a slightly different conversation. There is nothing here that is representative of anything that was going on at the time. This has a hint of originality to it. Well, it's more of a hint, more than a hint, isn't it? This really was a trailblazing effort. Buoyed by the success, no doubt. They were back on the road in no time at all. The follow-up, Fireball, came out a year later, if I recall correctly. I think in July, perhaps, of 71. Excuse me. It was written and recorded piecemeal in gaps between gigs. Not ideal. But In Rock had been recorded much the same way, and the results speak for themselves. When it came out, Fireball was a bit of a polarizing release. I think it's perhaps viewed better now in retrospect than it was at the time, although Blackmore's never been particularly complimentary about it, whereas Gillan said it's his favorite. I tend to side with Gillan on this one. Although I have to be honest, when I first heard it, it took me a while to it took a while for me to appreciate it, but they say it was the best things in life. When it opens with Fireball, you think, okay, this is just picked up where they left off. Maybe they've tightened up their songwriting. They've been playing together for all this time. Must have had some effect on their playing and their writing. But Fireball, still one of the fastest songs, heaviest songs they've ever written. Short and to the point, one of the few Deep Purple songs of the 70s. There are a few, but not many, which doesn't feature a Blackmore solo. The honors are taken briefly by Glover with a little bass interlude, but it's John Lord who takes the honors on this occasion. 3.5 minutes. Thank you. Hello. Welcome to the new record. Things get a little different after that. No, 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 Demon's Eye, and Anyone's Daughter would make up the first side. No, No, No is a much more relaxed effort. It's got those little funky influences. You could almost dance to it if you've had enough to drink. But it's not the funk that would go on to disfigure several of their later 70s releases. This is still tasteful and this is still rock, but they're pushing their boundaries a little bit. It's got some great playing on it, some great singing on it. It's adventurous. It's not what you probably necessarily would have expected, which I think is a good thing. They're pushing their boundaries. Where can they go? And they get away with it. This is a great song. So much the same for Demon's Eye. although it's perhaps not quite as strong as No No No. But still, it's a great song. And still, yeah, it's a little funky. But I'll forgive it. Anyone's Daughter's the odd one out here. It's almost a country tune. It's got a very, very humorous lyric, courtesy of Gillan, but it does rather stand out on here. I don't dislike it. A lot of people have said that oh, excuse me again, but this sort of lets the side down. I don't agree with that. It's they probably did it for a laugh, where they had other material in the can. We'll get to it. More fitting of the rest of the album, but maybe they just put it in to break it up. I don't know. I've never had a problem with it. It was actually quite interesting when 20 odd years later, they eventually got around to playing it live. In '93, it was it went over surprisingly well, I have to say. Okay, The Mule. Any fans of Mark I? This is the last time Deep Purple would indulge in psychedelia. Really was. This is a largely instrumental piece, and it would go on to serve as the vehicle for the drum solo in the live set. Then come the two standouts, Fools and No One Came, especially Fools. This is real progressive stuff. But they maintain their core identity. This is a heavy song, a slow, heavy, moody song. No One Came is slightly more upbeat. They both feature fantastic lyrical and vocal contributions from Gillan. Fantastic playing by the whole band. But this album was a grower. Apart from the title track, there's nothing that really says hello, hey, grabs you from the start. It does take time to appreciate, but I might have mentioned before, I think that's actually works to its advantage, that once you do appreciate it, you appreciate it all the more. Depending on where you were in the world, you either got Demon's Eye or you got Strange Kind of Woman. I got Demon's Eye. Strange Kind of Woman only knew from the live album, and years later from some compilation or other. Not until Roger Glover remixed Fireball for its 25th anniversary in 1996 did I actually get a version of the album with Strange Kind of Woman on it. I was not old enough. I wasn't actually born, so I never had the single. On that said remastered CD, there's some interesting outtakes. I'm Alone, Freedom, Slow Train. They're very good. And you could argue that any one of them could have replaced Anyone's Daughter on the original release, and you would have had a record more in keeping with in rock and saying there's no let-up on this. But that's not how it worked out. This is it their best one? I don't know. It's certainly the most adventurous one to date. Didn't quite do as, it sold millions, but it didn't quite sell the millions that In Rock did, or Machine Head would. And so there was some internal dissatisfaction with this, especially coming from a certain Mr. Blackmore, but okay. When it comes to the follow-up, they decided no more of this, ad hoc recording. So we all know the story. They went to Montreux. I'm not going to repeat that here. Trust me, we've all heard it 1,000 times. But they eventually found one place, a hotel closed down for the winter, where they could write and record and spend time with the songs, help them along, get them to develop, as opposed to writing it one day, trying to record it 3 weeks later when there's a gap in the touring schedule. And it seems to have paid dividends, because Machine Head is the one we all talk about. It's the one everybody knows. Casual rock fan will have heard of Machine Head because it contains Smoke on the Water. Unless we're talking about some very remote tribe in the Amazon rainforest. Everybody has heard of Smoke on the Water. And anybody with an interest in rock music knows from which album it comes. But it's not just that, is it? Highway Star, Lazy, Space Trucking, all four of them still to this day feature in the live set and have rarely been out of it. They are standards, they are classics. This is back. This is not in rock again. It is not in rock, but this is more focused again. They're less experimental here than they were on Fireball. So they've come, back on the straight and narrow, as it were, having been, expanded their horizon, shall we say, on Fireball. But obvious by this time, this is their third album together in a very short period of time. An insane amount of touring. They're as tight as they're ever going to be. And their songwriting has improved. Perhaps the best thing on the album, Pictures of Home, was ignored for years. It's an absolutely fantastic song. Years later, post Blackmore, it eventually got its inclusion in the live set, where it spent a long time. The only other song on the album that made it to the album was Never Before, where they attempted to write themselves another hit single after Black Knight had been such a success around the time of In Rock. Black Knight was written in a drunken stupor with a riff borrowed from a Ricky Nelson song. This time they took it slightly more seriously and did everything that could be expected of them to write a rock song with commercial appeal that should have been a hit. They neglected nothing. They did nothing wrong. The only problem is that no fucker bought it. Therefore, it disappeared. Has been played live very rarely, but it's not a bad song. We'll talk about When a Blind Man Cries, the sublime blues song that Ritchie didn't like, so it did not make the album. Could it have been included? Should it have been included? Well, you can debate this. The fact is that it was not included. But this is just a marvelous piece of work. These are standards. This is a band very, very near the peak of its powers. Its performing powers, its songwriting powers. Unfortunately, it was not to last. By the time they came to record their next album, which would turn out to be their last in the 70s for this lineup, well, at least Blackmore and Gillan were no longer on speaking terms. Again, the rights and wrongs and whys and wherefores of this are not germane to the discussion. On Who Do We Think We Are, Blackmore is noticeably more restrained. Certainly in terms of his soloing. He's not as prominent as he usually was, which allows John Lord to step up to the plate. Look, this one gets overlooked, but again, it's another album. It's a 7-song album. They all were. All 4 of them. 4 on the first side, 3 on the second side, apart from In Rock, which did it the other way around, but what's the point? It has Woman from Tokyo. It's the one song everybody talks about here, and in some ways it's the least impressive, as good as it is. Mary Long, Super Trooper, Smooth Dancer are all really good songs. I don't understand the hate. If hate is perhaps an exaggeration, the dislike, the dismissal of these songs, why they're not regarded in the same breath as some of their more celebrated siblings. They are every bit as good. And again, this is we had the very heavy, the very direct In Rock, the more experimental Fireball, the return to the direct approach of Machine Head. This one, by accident or design, takes some chances, especially on the second side. And my God, they are interesting. Not only interesting, they are very, very good. Smooth Dancer is a really good song. It's a really heavy drive with a really acerbic lyric from Gillan. Is he having a dig at Blackmore? Well, everybody thinks he is, so I guess that means he is. Rat Bat Blue, other than Smoke on the Water, is one of Blackmore's best riffs and should be more widely known. A great song. It's got a great groove to it. It really has. And Lord's solo is, well, you just got to hear it. Place in Line, it really is one of the odd ones out here. It is a slow blues, or at least it starts to be, with Gillan giving a very, very interesting and untypical vocal. It goes through a couple of tempo changes and mood changes. Again, this is, as with Fireball, some of this really is a grower. You really have to persevere with it. I think a lot of the damage that was done to this album and its reputation is twofold. One, this lineup broke up shortly after it was released. When was it released? 72. Maybe. No, they were still around for a while, but very little of it actually made it to the live set. Very little indeed. Which is a conversation for another video. So I think it kind of got overlooked. But Our Lady, the last song on the official album, it defies description. It is not a ballad. It is not a pop song. It's just sublime. There are no solos on it. It's beautifully constructed. It's a captivating piece of music. And again, what a performance from Gillan. Really. Nobody sings like him. But nobody comes up with these vocal melodies. They're very strange. But I mean that in a good way. This is just fantastic. Some people will tell you that they ended on a damp square, but it's absolute nonsense. They didn't. Ironically, given the state of relationships within the band and people's perhaps lack of 100% commitment, they came out with something of this quality. It does say a lot, and it's not the last time that will happen. But a much overlooked, much undervalued record. This is better than, even if we accept this is the lesser of the four. It is superior to anything Mark 1, 3, 4, or 5 produced as a record start to finish by some considerable margin. So that was that. Gillan and Glover were out. Yeah, we know what happened. I discussed it at length in another video. Don't have to rubbish all that again, do we? The Deep Purple reunion of 1984. Yes, all right, it was financially motivated. Blackmore's Rainbow had petered out. Great artistic success with Dio. Sold out, really. Turned it into a Foreigner-based Journey-type pop rock outfit with initially Graham Bonnet and Joe Lynn Turner. He didn't get the results, the kudos or the financial results he thought that should have brought him. And as Glover had joined him in Rainbow, yeah, I think it was obvious that they were happy. Gillan had just spent a year in Black Sabbath. Prior to that, his own band, wonderful as they were, ended in chaos. I guess he didn't need the money that desperately. He'd have earned well for his year with Black Sabbath, but yeah, he had one eye on the bank. Ian Pace probably didn't. Was kicking around, just left Gary Moore. And John Lord was completely and utterly wasting his time in Whitesnake, and had been for several years. I don't know. You just don't know what happens, do you? I mean, did Coverdale give him a job out of gratitude? I don't know. But to have John Lord in your band and not to use him. Well, anyway. It can be no surprise. Well, it can be no surprise. There was no way Mark I were going to reunite. For one, Rod Evans was still very much persona non grata after the bogus Deep Purple reunion of 1980. So there was no way they were going to work with him. Tommy Boland's demise obviously made the logistics of a Mark IV reunion rather tricky. And there was no demand for Mark III. This is not what people talked about when they talked about Deep Purple. They might have got round to it at some point, but it was pretty much understood that it was the Mark II lineup. And anyway, Coverdale was still a couple of years removed from his mega success with Whitesnake, but he and Blackmore had a strained relationship at this time, around the time of the reunion. I think they'd actually come to fisticuffs, how very mature. Glenn Hughes was in a terrible personal situation. He was about to come to something of a head when he joined up with Tony Iommi a couple of years later. So, given his reputation back in the 70s with Deep Purple and the fact that he hadn't changed, I can't imagine anybody would have been queuing up to work with him again. So it was, for all reasons, be them good or bad, any conceivable reason, the only viable Deep Purple reunion was Mark II, which they duly did. And they came out with an album which is pretty damn good. It's safe. It's not experimental in any way, shape, or form. But perhaps that was always going to be the case. They were getting to know each other again. They'd all come from their different situations. They needed to learn to function as a unit again. Although the old camaraderie, well, perhaps not the camaraderie, but certainly the financial camaraderie had gone. There was already, even when I bought the record, taking it home, looking at it before I played it, just about all songs credited to Blackmore, Gillan, and Glover, where they used to be credited 5 ways. It was all right, okay, yeah. It might have been Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, but it's somebody thinking this is Ritchie Blackmore's Deep Purple. I don't think they benefited from that. So perhaps it was understandable that the record would not not shatter expectations in terms of creativity. It was hugely successful, as was the surrounding tour. But in hindsight, there are 2 really great songs on it. That's been the title track and Knocking at Your Back Door. Of the rest, there's nothing bad by any stretch. In fact, Under the Gun, Mean Streak, Hungry Days, actually. They're good rock songs. They're better than anything Rainbow was pumping out, had been pumping out prior to this, and certainly better than anything Whitesnake had been pumping out prior to that. I still think the Gillan Band were doing better, or if not consistently, certainly on occasion doing better. But again, that's another conversation. What is noticeable is, however, the change in Ian Gillan's voice from Born Again, recorded a year previously, to here. Most noticeable on the ballad Wasted Sunsets, which I don't care what anybody says, is an attempt to recreate the style and feel of When a Blind Man Cries. And they do pretty well. But Gillan blew his voice on Born Again album and tour, and it would take him a good few years to recover it. What's very noticeable here, if you get from the Perfect Strangers tour, if you get the show from Paris that was recorded, unfortunately they recorded that one, his voice is as rough as a badger's arse. He sounds terrible. Doesn't sound that bad on the record, but the power's not there, and the tone's different. He would recover, but it's the only thing slightly marring the performance here. But no, great. Again, nobody expected them to be the trailblazers they were when they first got together. Too much time had passed. They were too comfortable. They were not as young. It's a really good record. I don't think it disappointed anybody. And it set them up for the reunion, because it could have gone wrong. I mean, it could have been a turd. It really could have gone wrong, and it wasn't. And it set them up. And they said, look, okay, we're not just trading on our past glories. This is what this is who and what we are today, and it stands up. So, hats off. Huge bounce of touring, and eventually they have to record a follow-up. Probably took too long over it, in hindsight. But again, in the background, personality conflicts, centering around You know, a dynamic duo of Blackmore and Gillan. The band themselves are very complimentary about this segment. It was recorded in a really difficult atmosphere, much as I said about the recording of Who Do We Think We Are, which has obviously coloured their opinions of it, maybe why they don't like to revisit it or put any of the material in the live set. I get your point. I'm not going to go get back with my ex-wife just because it pleased my mother-in-law. You know, it's... If they're unhappy with it, they're unhappy with it. But that doesn't dilute the quality of the material here. Now, again, while Perfect Strangers was safe, it was down the road, here they do, despite the internal tensions, they are far more expressive here than they were on Perfect Strangers. And that works generally. I'll be honest with you, I can do without Hard Loving Woman. It's an attempt to write a rock and roll song. It kind of works, but it's really, yeah, okay. Call of the Wild is an attempt to write a single. It could have been worse. It could also have been better. The other one that perhaps kind of on the fence about is Black and White, although there's good musical ideas going on. Yeah, it's just like much of this album, you feel that these ideas were strangled halfway through, that they were not allowed to develop. I mean, I don't know, we don't know, none of us were there, but Gillan has gone on record as saying, you know, as long as Blackmore was happy with the guitar playing, then everybody else would just acquiesce. And, you know, rather than say, well, yeah, okay, but, you know, maybe the song could do without this or with that. We don't know. But songs like Bad Attitude, and especially The Unwritten Law, these are really great songs, extremely strong material. Really surprisingly, given where they were at this point in their career, that they could come up with stuff like that. Mad Dog's just great fun. You know, it could have been an In Rock outtake or a Fireball outtake or something. It's just great fun. Spanish Archer is actually... This is one of the best things I ever did. Although it sounds unfinished, and maybe it was. It's serious. Blackmore soloing away against a really good driving beat, and in between, Gillan has packed some verses with some wonderful, wonderful vocal performance here, and some really, really great engaging lyrics that speak to us all. Strange Ways, again, they're trying something different here. Trying to be modern, perhaps, I don't know. You hear the odd guitar synth creeping in. Could maybe have done without it. It's Strange Ways. Yeah, it's one of those ones. You know where they're going here, but it didn't become what Fools became on In Rock. You know, the great creative endeavor. On Fireball. It's somehow, maybe this was one that they just strangled it, but there's just so much potential here. Okay, Mitzi Dupree's good fun. It's just a relaxed blues with another witty Gillan vocal, but Blackmore hated it that much. He wouldn't. What you hear on the album is the demo version. He would not re-record it. And Dead or Alive was just written for the stage. It's foot to the floor. It's one of those things, you know, it harks back to Highway Star and Burn, you know, fast driving song, guitar solo, organ solo, you know, packed in between the verses and the chorus. It's a bit of a formula song, but as these things go, it's not bad. This did not do as well. Maybe the initial euphoria of the reunion had worn off a bit. The production of this album did not do it any favors. Sorry, Roger. They tried to give it what would have been at the time a modern, up-to-date sound, and it sounds shit. There are some spectacularly hideous synth sounds, courtesy of Mr. Lord, that didn't sound good the day I bought it, and have not aged well at all. Other than that, I really like this. I've always, apart from, there's a couple of clunkers maybe, I've always preferred this, despite its shortcomings, to Perfect Strangers. It showed where they could go. They were not yet finished as a creative force, or they should not have been based on this. Of course, what happened afterwards, they fell out. Gillan went. Joe Lynn Turner came in for one album, one tour. I've already discussed that. Don't feel like mentioning him again. But that didn't work. And with the 25th anniversary of this lineup, of the band, coming up in 1993, management record company, nah, we need Gillan back. And Blackmore was bribed, I believe, to take him back in the band. They'd already recorded much of what emerged as the battle rages on, with Joe Lynn Turner still in the band. And even then, it was a even if you take the vocals out of it, the backing tracks are vastly superior to what appeared on Slaves and Masters. So maybe even Blackmore had taken the hint that this, wishy-washy crap is not what the fan base is looking for. But everything had been written for Turner, and basically when Gillan came in, they just wiped the vocals from the tracks. He was presented with the backing tracks, and basically had to make the best of it. And I think, given that, he did rather fucking well. This is another one that will never be a Deep Purple classic, given the circumstances. It was recorded under. But again, it's another one. It's far better than most people will have you believe. Title track's a classic. Anya's back in the set even now. All right, there's a couple that are great. One Man's Meat. Not Gillan's best effort, I have to say. And a fairly humdrum song. Solitaire's a great song, a great vehicle for John Lord. Sadly never played live. Nasty Piece of Work is a great riff and a great song. Even Lick It Up, which most people, it's got a weak chorus, but there's something really engaging about the vocal melody of the verses. It has that, even when they're not speaking to each other, even if they're at each other's throats, there's just so much more authenticity and sparkle to this than there was on Slaves and Masters. It is that simple. Again, this by 1993, the return of Gillan plus the 25th anniversary. I don't know how hard that was marketed, but at least the return of Gillan ensured a successful European tour. Despite what Gillan will later tell you, that they were playing to half-empty houses. They weren't. This was a very well-received tour, and for very good reason. For most of the shows, they were on fire. Yes, there was the Rotterdams, there was the Birminghams, but I saw the last four of them, and fuck, they were on fire. And that's that. Blackmore went, never to return. So between 1970 and 1993, with breaks in between, Mark II recorded seven albums together. At least three of which are all-time band classics. Most people would say. I would say they all are. There is nothing here, to me, that would take a backseat to anything like 1, 3, 4, 5 recorded now. Even at its weakest here, some of the lesser moments of The Battle Rages On, or of The House of Blue Light, is, for my money, still superior in general to anything else that they did up until this point. What comes after Blackmore is a completely different conversation, and we will get round to that. Have no fear. But no, that's it. There's something special about this that the other lineups just couldn't replicate. Whether it was just the instrumental brilliance of Blackmore, Lord, and Pace, produce good music with very talented but perhaps more conservative musicians, Coverdale, Hughes, or than the sort of off-the-wall brilliance that Gillan brought to it, combined with Glover's songwriting ability and compositional sensibilities. That seemed to work the best. Others will disagree, no doubt. Obviously, and I've said before, if you take a track like Burn or Soldier of Fortune, Stormbringer, You Fool No One, yes, they're great tracks, all of them, all four of them. But the majority of the stuff that was produced without Gillan and Glover is not as good as the stuff that was produced with Gillan and Glover. It is that simple. It was just the stars aligned with the five of them, and the stars would align for them again. Something that doesn't happen to many bands, but again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So that's it. Yeah, they stand head and shoulders, certainly from the 70s up until 1993. The collective efforts of Mark II stand head and shoulders above anything else the band did, and I don't think if it wasn't for the Mark II efforts, Deep Purple we wouldn't be talking about them with such reverence as we do today. Right, there you go. Okay, we will be back, and I will deal with the rest of it. So, anybody who disagrees, fine. You know what to do. It doesn't hurt. Comment, like, share. What's the other one? I don't know. Subscribe. Yes, that's it. Subscribe. Yeah. So that's 4 things I have to remind you to do. I mean, it's, getting old. I should write this down. But no, okay, that's it. So it's not intended to be an album review. I don't think anybody listening to this needs an album review for any of this stuff. I'm just saying why I think it's superior, what its qualities it has that sets it apart, and why certainly when it comes to anything up into including the Battle Rages are. This is Deep Purple. The rest of it, I just don't think is that important or that great. Okay, we will be back. Next video will be about something. That's a profound insight for you. Not yet sure what it will be about, but it will be about something. So until then, I thank you. I wish you well. Mashonkia.